Today I'm speaking with Lee and Angie Perry of the Richwood area. Lee works at Wild Flavors and Angie's a stay-at-home mom. They have 4 biological children and 5 adopted ones. Let's hear about their family today on People of Northern Kentucky. Lee and Angie, first let me say welcome to People of Northern Kentucky.
Thank you.
Can you just tell me a little bit about each of your children?
So we have, as you mentioned, 4 biological. Jacob, Ashley, Emily, and Jared were our 4 biological children. Their range is from 26 to 19 years old, and 2 boys, 2 girls. And we've seen them grow up, and they're out of the house now. And then Jared, who's down in Tennessee at college. But the 3 of them are married. So Jacob is married to a beautiful young lady named Michelle, and then we have Emily, who is married to a young man named Micah, and then Ashley, who's married to a young man named Alex. So the 2 of those marriages just happened last year. So we've seen a lot of change over this time period. And then for the younger group, we call them the littles. The littles are ranged from 11 to 6, and so Anna, who we adopted from China, she's 11. We have a sibling group of 3 boys, Joshua, Caleb, and Joseph, and they're 10. The twins, Joshua and Caleb are twins, and then Joseph, the younger brother, at 9, and then Eliana, our youngest, is 6, and we adopted her from China as well.
First, let me say that all the mothers and fathers of this area admire your bravery. I mean, 9 kids. So, did you always imagine yourself raising this many kids?
Did we see ourselves raising this many children? Absolutely not. No. When we were dating, he wanted 5 children and I wanted 3 children, and we thought we were compromising with 4. And Jared, got to be about doable age. He was 8 and he was getting more independent. And that is when Ashley, who was 12 at the time, started praying that we would adopt. And so, honestly, after we had 3 children, I thought, full house, and I sold everything. We got rid of the crib, we got rid of everything. And then Lee begged for about 2 years for 1 more child, and we had Jared. So no, we never imagined. I remember looking at families with, larger families with 9 children and just thinking, I have no clue how they do that, but that is not us, because I was an only child, and he had 4 other siblings, so he was more used to the commotion. But I was always telling our first 4, shh, shh. I was not used to the noise. So the answer is no. We absolutely did not plan on this.
So how did that come about then?
Well, when Ashley was 12 years old, life was getting easier. Jared was a little bit older and more independent. He was kind of born older. He was born independent. And she started to pray that we would adopt a little girl from China. And we had friends in our church who had adopted from China. And so she witnessed that, and she even did a little babysitting for that family. And she just really developed a heart for adoption, a heart for especially the girls of China who had been abandoned. And she prayed for a solid almost 2 years. And when she first began to pray, we would just roll our eyes and say, there's absolutely no way we will ever adopt from China. We just saw obstacles. And as time went on and she continued to pray, he would be ready and I wouldn't, or I would be ready to adopt and he wouldn't. And I think we finally just kind of came together and said,
We finally gave in. All right. But what are we going to do to keep her from stop praying?
Yeah. And so we began the adoption process. So we started to adopt Anna in 2005.
Yeah.
Which was the year she was born, actually.
Yeah, but when you make a decision like that, and we didn't have, at the time, not a high-paying job in Idaho at all. So we had to make the decision. In order to do that, we had to move, and we had to go find a job that would pay more, because just even in terms of financing the adoption and what it would take to just make ends meet, having another child was going to require some changes. And so we moved from Twin Falls, Idaho to McDonough, Georgia, or Barnesville, Georgia to be exact. So we took this move clear across the country, all with the intent of adopting this little girl.
When we first got Anna, she was extremely traumatized by the orphanage, by neglect. And she had had some heart surgery and been strapped down, we think. And when we picked her up, they were just really very happy to get rid of her. They just shoved her at us and said, she's strong. They kept saying in Chinese over and over, she's strong, she's smart, and she's strong-willed. So anyway, I think bringing her through that trauma and seeing her go from a very angry, hurt child to just this beautiful child. I mean, it took years. It took a good 2 years, and we saw her blossom. But I remember holding her while she was going through that trauma and just realizing the effect of children who are brought up with no mother, and what that does to a child, and how that, what kind of harm comes to a child. And so we moved to Indianapolis, and we started some foster care training. And I think he had thought maybe we would adopt out of foster care, wanted to adopt out of foster care. But I do remember specifically just telling God, if you ever want us to adopt again, you're going to have to drop them in our lap, because I just couldn't imagine going through the whole process again. I couldn't imagine the paperwork. I couldn't imagine financially going through it. I couldn't imagine emotionally going through it. So we ended up in Indianapolis, and God dropped 3 boys in our laps. We got a call one day, and they said, can you keep these boys for the weekend? And I remember thinking, well, we could do anything for a weekend. And the first night, Anna was saying her prayers, and she said, Mama, they're going to stay. They're going to be here forever. And she was right. They stayed. Yeah. So that's how we got the boys, and we were in Indianapolis.
So then tell me about your youngest child.
So right before we moved to the Cincinnati area, we had started adopting Ellie. We went to an orphan summit conference with the intention to start an orphan ministry in our church in Indianapolis. And we came out with the intention of adopting again from China. Yeah. Don't go to an orphan summit conference unless you want to adopt another child.
Yeah. So we decided after that conference, you know what, we have these 3 wonderful Hispanic boys. We've got this beautiful Asian girl, and so we thought, why not? Let's just round it out with 1 more. And so we pursued the process again, went through all the paperwork, began that, and a year and a half, 2 years later, from the time we decided after that event to getting her, Eliana, we flew back over to China. We flew into Shanghai, flew to an area which is pretty remote from a Western standpoint. So it was a very Chinese area. So there were not a lot of tourists, or not a lot of Western influencers. So that was interesting. But through that, we picked her from the orphanage there and came back, and it's been a great. That was when she was 2 years old, when she had just turned 2. So we've had her now 4 years.
She was almost 3.
Almost 3, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand for many years, even after adopting, that you were also homeschooling your children for a good deal of that time.
Mm-hmm.
With adoptive children, it's important that they bond with their parents and their families, and so the decision to homeschool, I think, really helped their ability to bond and kind of come together as a family a little bit.
You mentioned a few of the issues that you have with adoption. What are some other special issues that you face when adopting kids?
Different attachment disorders. Absolutely. And I mean, Anna suffered from a lot of neglect. I don't think there was any physical abuse, but there was definitely neglect. And so and because of her surgery, and she didn't have any nurturing during that time, she would be very prone to anger, especially if she got hurt. She would just rage. So there was a couple years there, it was really tough with her. With the boys, it was different. They had been in, I think, 4 homes by the time they were 3. And everybody was mom and everybody was dad. And so they would go sit on other people's lap and they would go take off with them and not really know. There's 2 special people in my life, a mom and a dad, that I can trust, that I can open up to. So it takes years. It really.
Yeah. With Eliana, she ended up having to have half of her brain disconnected to fix the issue with the seizures. So, 2 years ago, she had to learn, basically she was paralyzed on her left-hand side and had to learn until her opposite brain side was able to help start learning the function, helping her gain those motor skills back in her left side. And of course, she's never going to be 100%, but she's doing remarkably well for what she's gone through.
So I hear that your eldest, your son, and his wife Michelle is going to be following in your footsteps, correct?
Yes, they are adopting from Bulgaria, we think, unless God changes things and puts his hands on it. But yeah, and we're very excited about that. I mean, it's really neat to see your children watch, the good and the bad, the redeeming qualities of adoption. To see, there's nothing, honestly, like seeing a child closed to love, distrusting, insecure, and hurt. There's nothing like seeing a child like that completely changed and blossom. And it takes time, and it's really hard, but it's so redemptive, and it's so beautiful. And but the fact that Jake and Michelle, they lived it. They lived the hard, and they saw the redemptive qualities too, and they saw what happened when children are brought into a safe home and given a new name, and they just. So it's really neat to see that being passed down. Is there anything you would like people to know about us?
Well, I would say this. Anything that I would like people to know is just that we were really, I know it doesn't seem like it, but we're actually pretty normal people. When you think about a family with 9 kids, you think, man, are they nuts? Or what are they crazy? What are they doing? How are they wired? But really, as Angie mentioned, after our first 3, we thought we were done. And, it's just, God has plans for you, and you end up, following in a different course. But we're actually pretty normal people. So I guess anybody can do what we're doing. It's just, you just have to
be crazy enough to do it.
Thank you for joining us today. Every Thursday at 10 a.m., get to know your neighbor by catching a new edition of People of Northern Kentucky.